Hello everyone, thank you all for coming tonight and staying for our talk back after the show. I hope you enjoyed the first public reading of Agape's workshop production of the Yellow Wallpaper, written by our very own artistic director, Jeff Davis, adapted from the short story by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. My name is Jeff Knoll. I serve on the board of directors of Agape as the secretary. I'll be facilitating tonight's talk back, and it will be an opportunity for us to get feedback from you as an audience, as well as for you to ask questions of the playwright and of our lovely actors who have all played a pivotal role in developing the script and the ambiance of tonight's reading. As our narrator, we have Evelyn LaLonde. As Jane, we have CiCi Barone. And as John, we have Ismael Soto III. Now, to get the ball rolling, my first question is for the playwright. I've always been a skeptic and a literalist when people say I'm the luckiest guy in the world. But throughout our nearly 5 years together and all our ups and downs, particularly those in 2016, I now know how they felt and what they meant. For having you in my life, I undoubtedly feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. So my question for you is, will you marry me?
Well, I think the ring that's on your finger should answer that question for you, but yes. Thank you. Damn it, the show wasn't supposed to have a happy ending.
I know, I felt kind of weird about it.
I didn't know you were going to do that.
Nobody knew it.
This is Jeff's mom and my future mother-in-law.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Me too. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get serious again.
Yeah, so now for the actual talk back. My first question is for you, the audience. Did you enjoy the show? We assume that for many of you, this may be the first stage reading or workshop production you've seen. What did you think about it?
Any thoughts about just the format of seeing a staged reading? Was it?
I would leave this more formal. I think it's wonderful. Staged the way it is.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Really? Interesting. I will say, in my, as I was writing it, being a director as well, I do have an idea in my head of what I want this show to look like in its full form. And there are certainly elements of this that I think what we did here will certainly translate, specifically the use of projections to help tell the story. I think the use of projections, especially with the idea of the shadow and the ghosts in the house and how that looks and what that looks like, I think what we came up with for this is a very primitive idea of what I want to do. I think there's a lot more that we can do in terms of movement with the images, but yes, it's going to still stay. Some of those ideas that were presented here tonight are certainly going to remain. And I think the other big thing that has been in my head is intimacy. I mean, we're looking at venues to put this in right now, and any venue that seats more than 100 people is out. Because I think you need to feel like you're in this pressure cooker with these two characters. But thank you for that. That's a really interesting comment.
Similarly, I think it lends itself to a black box.
Yes,
Theater.
absolutely, absolutely.
You don't have to see any props, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think there's not that many to begin with. I mean, I at one point started coming up with a prop list for the show. I'm like, okay, so there's the gramophone, and there's a couple of books, and the journals and pens, and the tray and the syringe, and there's a list of maybe 15 props, which is not a lot.
But
Yeah.
you see all that anyway.
Yeah, no, really, you do, absolutely.
As your potential stage manager.
If you want the job, it's yours.
I'm not looking forward to staying late every night, putting your wallpaper back.
That one most
So there
likely
actually
projection
is,
again.
I've thought about that too, because yes, it's, that's the one thing with this show that, like, you have to have that reveal of she's torn the paper off the walls, and projections I think can certainly do that, or there is a way of having double-sided walls and you just turn the wall around.
We'll work it out, we'll work it
But
out.
yeah, my mind's already going in that direction of how do you make this easy to do, because it's such a great visual.
You know, she's gotta tear the wallpaper.
Yeah,
She's gotta have costume shape.
yeah,
We have ideas for that too.
yeah.
So the short story was written over 100 years ago, and in that time it was shocking in its portrayal of women and mental health. Did it resonate to you as a modern audience member?
To a certain extent, I mean, there's obviously lots of parallels. Particularly, I know you're a log-cabin Republican, so you.
Well, not so much anymore, but go on.
When you were a log-cabin.
Yes.
There's obviously modern connections here.
Yeah.
That make it very contemporary. Yeah, it resonated. There were a few things I thought were anachronistic, but I'm not familiar with the short story, so they may be in the short story, and I just may be a little, short-sighted in that way.
Yeah.
You mentioned gramophone as opposed to phonograph record.
Yeah.
For 1899, there were gramophones, obviously.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and what's funny is that word has switched back and forth so many times in the drafts of the scripts,
Yeah.
For that reason, because that technology was just shifting. Same thing with telephone. Telephones obviously weren't very, very uncommon at the time. I needed to have a reason for him to have a line to the outside world.
that part bothered me a little bit,
Yeah.
too, because in
Yeah.
Portsmouth, Virginia, in 1999, I'm not sure they're going to be, a rented house is going to have, it's been abandoned for years and years, it's going to have a telephone.
That is true. Yeah, I that is one thing that I need to look at in revising this further is how do we get John to communicate with the outside world in a way that makes sense for that time period,
Yeah.
because that is a bit of a challenge. And I was thinking about that at one point.
So the cast and playwright, and some of us on the board too, have had many conversations about John. In your opinion, is he a villain, a flawed hero, or a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. You start off as a villain. Like, there was gasps from down there.
That was fear.
Like, they were like, I'm gonna come up there.
That was very weird to hear because we
Yes.
only read it, with us, and so we kind of sat down and knew what was going to happen already.
Yeah.
Although there are still moments where it's like, first of all, for me writing something, like John is very far from me as a human being, so writing some of the stuff that he says to her made me feel uncomfortable, and it was kind of like, if it makes me feel uncomfortable, it needs to stay.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's good.
The first time that we as a cast read the scene where he forces the morphine on me, like we all had a moment afterward, we had to like shiver, we all just felt gross about that scene. We're like, that's staying, it's awesome. But
Yeah, and there were times reading it where the two of them would stop and just look at me and say, man, he's really an asshole. and then they'd continue.
I think
But-
that's what's so good is you're so good at that. It made me hate you.
I mean, because I get that. At the beginning, he's a villain, but he's a flawed hero. Everything he does, I feel that, as dumb as it is, it was completely in his mind, out of love.
Well, that's where, you turn. Like when Act 2 starts up and like whatever happened in that month, and you were the happiest thing in the world and all of that, like you could see the love that you had for Jane, and you could see the love that you had for John. And going into that story, when you start telling the story and she'd fallen asleep and didn't get to hear, like we were just stopping short of that confession. Like there was something there, and I couldn't wait to find out what it was. But at that point, you had kind of changed and how I felt like you're not a villain. There's something there. There's something going on, and maybe we'll get to what we're going to, what other questions there are. But I still have some questions about.
No, please ask any questions that you have. That's the whole purpose.
Did you do it?
Well, I had you labeled as a villain starting out, and then I had empathy because you were suckered in by your doctor peer that was forcing you to do this, and then I felt suckered in when I found out what a monster you were.
That's awesome.
Like, did you kill Catherine? And did you make her believe, like, your argument, like that whole tirade that you went on, I'm like, I believed your story and how you kind of went through it, and then you threw that out, and I'm like, ooh, that would be a really good plot twist, that John really did kill Catherine. And
I don't know if we have collectively come up with that answer
We've
either, because
discussed
we've
it a lot.
asked it also.
Well, okay, first of all, I initially had Catherine alive, and they read that draft of the script, and they both came in and said, why isn't she dead? I said, because there's kind of this rule when you're writing, which is don't kill babies. Like, audiences do not like stories that involve dead babies. It's just not something that you throw in there. But they encouraged me to do it, and then when I did, I realized it was a lot more fun to leave it ambiguous. Especially because one of the things that's so brilliant about the short story, and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do it. It's a hell of a lot shorter than this. You can get done with it in probably 15, 20 minutes. But it's all told from Jane's point of view and all told through her journal entries. So you don't get to hear from John. In the short story, the baby is alive. But one of the things that's so brilliant about the short story is because it's told from Jane's point of view as she is going crazy, you realize very early on that you're dealing with an unreliable narrator, and a lot of the stuff that she says, you can't really take it at surface value. And there's a lot of conversation about, is she in a room with yellow wallpaper? Is she in an asylum? Is this all in her head? Did she dream this? What is the truth of this story? And in staging it, you lose some of that. As soon as you put two actors in a room with yellow wallpaper on it, that ambiguity, at least on that piece, is gone. And we kind of came to the realization that leaving it somewhat open as to who killed Catherine brings back some of that ambiguity that we lost. And that was really, really fun. And there are days when I think he did it, and there are days when I think she did it, and I wrote the damn thing.
Well, and every time, I will say, every time that I've read the part where I'm trying to still convince her that Catherine is with my sister in Richmond, I mean, it's partially the way it's written, but it's partially the way that we rehearse it as well, as it starts to get to a point where I collect myself again, and I'm trying to reassure her that everything's fine, and I almost get this image that she is in an institute, like an asylum, and then I am her doctor just trying to convince her that her life is normal and that there's nothing wrong, enough to keep her from harming herself and like going crazier. But I always have that image of being her full-on doctor in an asylum trying to convince her she's
And in my
fine.
head, this relationship is not a doctor-patient in my head, because I go back and forth the way Ismael does. Also, in my head, there's the times where I am truly just in an asylum. I've never actually had a baby. Ismael has never been my husband. He's just my doctor. But in my head, seeing him daily, he's my husband. We made a baby, and then one of us killed her. And so I think that's where it also gets fun as an actor, is that ambiguity means that you can play play it one way one day and change it up a little bit the next day, and it completely changes the ending and the outcome. So, I mean, that part has been really fun to explore also. So.
Yeah.
And you would.
I think the way that John is behaving is pretty typical of that time.
Absolutely.
I worked in the psych unit, I'm a psychiatric nurse, and I worked with a lot of women who have had postpartum depressions, and some of them have killed their babies. It was not that unusual for me to see this. I mean, this happens.
So in your opinion then, as someone in the know, how was our portrayal of some of this stuff, having seen it professionally and clinically?
Well, it's different now because there are different medications.
We have more than morphine.
I mean, as one who has had to force patients to take medication, needles, I mean, I know you do it what's best for them, but sometimes you just get so angry. Why don't you know? Just take the damn needle. It's like when you have a kid and you have to force them to take the medication because they're sick. They don't want to do it, so you have to hold them down and put the stuff down their throat. You just have to do it.
Struggling with my daughter.
Which one? Both
The
of
older
them?
one.
Oh.
The younger one takes medicine just fine. She licks her lips at him. Awesome.
That would give you something to worry about.
She's only 12 months old, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think it would be hard to see this as an actual production without you two doing these roles. Like, I mean, I know there's a ton of other talented people out there, but the emotion that you both brought to, like, I'm watching your eyes just like welling up as you're going through that, and I mean, your tears are coming down. Like, if you're not sitting in this front row, then, they may have missed out on all of that. And I mean, it was really, really good. I don't know that I could see somebody else doing that as well. Like, just the chemistry was there, the way you kind of played off of each other. It was good.
So if I can share something about that, first of all, totally agree with you. But CiCi and I have worked together before, and we were working on a comedy, and there was a conversation that we had about, so she said, she really wanted to do a dramatic show. A couple days later in rehearsal, I said something about the yellow wallpaper, and she says, oh my gosh, I love that short story. Is there a play version of it? And I was saying, yeah, there are some, but they're not that good. And I started writing, and she was immediately in my head because we had this conversation. I got about halfway through writing, had her kind of pegged as the Jane that I wanted, but I didn't have anyone for John. And I got to pretty close to the end of the first act. I think I wrote that act one ending monologue where you blow up at her. Yeah, which one? I know.
Which
Sorry. But I think I got to the end of that first act. I was like, man, I need someone that can be intense but can also like show some tenderness. And my fiance says, I think you need to call Ismael. And then like from then on, it was like I couldn't see another pair of actors in my head while I was writing, and that was really kind of fun. Like the two of you were legitimately in my head while I was writing some of the stuff, and like I could hear how you say it. It was really special.
You should be afraid.
Yeah, you were.
Good job with fiance. It's only been like 10 minutes.
Oh well, he got his ring like a month ago, so we've been throwing up that.
Second proposal.
Yeah.
A long time ago,
Yeah.
we decided that we each wanted to propose.
We designed the rings
Separate,
together.
so
Like
nice.
this is this was not a shocker, but it's nice. Thank you.
Now you get to wear yours. I
Yeah.
don't have to hide it from you.
Yay!
Yeah. Where were you hiding it, by the way?
In the living
Don't worry
room.
about that.
What? In the living room? What?
Do you see the production having Evelyn kind of doing the narration again, or letting the
Here's what
tell
I want to do. And I haven't even brought this up to Evelyn yet. But however we do Charlotte, and I think it's probably going to be like videos and projections, and I want you to be Charlotte. I think that'd be really freaking
That'd be
cool
fun.
to have you be a part of that. But I don't know. There is Evelyn has been such a huge part of the development of the show, and she was a part of the readings that we had at my house from the first draft onward, and the notes that she's given me have really shaped this show. Some of the stuff that you told me and encouraged me to do really changed the second act. So I'm incredibly grateful to your input, and I'm glad that you were a part of this, and I want to keep you in this in some way.
Thank you.
As it grows.
I mean, I think it would be cool. Like, you would maybe stop short of saying like black out or something like that, but you asked us to use our imagination because all we had was the screen. So you telling the story of things that were going on, I think, helped to minimize what then we could focus on you two. Like, we weren't distracted by a tray or a phonograph or Ismael trying to draw morphine from something. Like, I could see all of that happening in my imagination, but still focus on you two and the dialogue that you were doing.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it would be.
She set the scene, right from the
Yeah.
beginning.
I think it was much
And you just
spookier
picture it
without having a lot of,
A lot of props and things.
the hair stood up the back of my head at times.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Good. That's
I
good.
have a terrible headache and like tensions here. Dude, that's horrible.
Yeah, I'm a little tired.
They've been here all day because we had just today to work this in this space and figure out how it was going to work here as opposed to in my living room. So.
Well, I mean, and this alone is just it's very involved. So it's going to take a moment to like decompress and.
It's a very emotionally charged role, and for me personally, I clung to this script immediately. I just had a baby a year ago, and I've actually struggled with postpartum depression this time around. I didn't the first time, so this has been a whole new experience for me, and the fact that I'm even able to say that in a public forum is so completely different than it was like even 15 years ago, talking about postpartum depression and being scorned for it or saying that's not a real thing, get over yourself. So this gave me an outlet that I haven't been able to have before, because she's like, the way that for a man who's never had children to be able to write about postpartum depression and all of the things that he wrote, it's been a very surreal experience for me, because a lot of the stuff that he wrote for Jane to say was a lot of the things that I didn't know how to voice when just trying to explain it to my husband. And then it was also creepy because my baby's name is Charlotte. So, yeah.
What was really interesting for me a couple of weeks ago, we went on this vacation with my family, and I gave my mom a copy of the script. I'm not even sure if I shared this with the three of you yet.
You did with me,
But I shared a copy of the script with my mom, and she read most of it while we were, in the hotel together. She finished it on the plane on the plane home. But after she finished the first act, she came to me and she said, "There are things that you have this woman saying that I have been through that I haven't told you about yet." And that was really kind of interesting. And then, of course, at some point, I had to ask her, like, okay, so did I get it right? And my mom has had several miscarriages, has suffered from postpartum depression, has had a hysterectomy, has gone through a lot of the same things, and she has two children, me and my sister, and my sister has Downs, and was born in the 1970s when you didn't keep a child with Downs. So I think that has really kind of colored her worldview as a parent, and I think there's a lot of similarity between that and some of the, I know, expecting a healthy child and not getting what you expect. Both my parents went through a period of depression after that child was born, and it's still not easy every day. And I think maybe that's why, there were certain. This this should have, there were moments here that were challenging in figuring out how Jenny would view the world, but there were a lot of moments that weren't, and I think it's probably because of my family and what I've seen other women go through. I think it's really easy for me to look at that and just think, okay, how would this person react to this situation, and write that. Any other questions for us?
I'm in that 61 to 75 group, and it's past my bedtime.
Well, on that note, thank you all for coming. Thank you for being part of the post discussion, and we hope you come and see the full show next year when we fully know this job.
Thank you.